We're with William Ramsay today, Deputy Secretary Director of International Energy Agency, IEA. Mr. Ramsay, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You know, you mentioned Iran, and I know that Iran has a lot of oil, and they're also testing for nuclear programs, is what they say. And part of that makes sense because they are so highly rich in uranium. But do you believe yourself that this is what they are trying to do, is make nuclear power to understand it, or are they actually using this as a guise for something else?
Well, I would get well beyond my brief as the International Energy Agency to speculate on whether Iran is working towards nuclear devices. It's not surprising to me to see any country say to themselves, I would rather export my oil and gas and earn a lot of money from that and use nuclear power as my source of civilian electricity. Why not? It may make economic sense.
Does OPEC actually keep some of its sweet reserves?
Well, OPEC's been around a long time with an interest in maintaining prices, trying to get as much as they can for their barrel of oil. It's quite a reasonable thing for a natural resource exporter. But the process of maintaining prices has often led to them having to withdraw supplies to the market in order to keep the prices up. We saw that in Doha a few days ago with the informal agreement to reduce production. That means that the oil that could be produced from Saudi Arabia that costs a lot less to produce won't be produced, and somebody will have to go find oil in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Caspian Basin, or offshore Brazil in order to meet the needs of the marketplace. At $60 a barrel, that's not much of a challenge. There's a lot of oil out there at that price.
And how involved are you with OPEC? Are you asking countries or OPEC to actually make advances in alternative energies?
OPEC, if you think of OPEC as consuming countries rather than producers, their populations are growing pretty fast. They are amongst the fastest growing markets for power in the world. So they too are concerned about what kind of power they're going to supply to their people. If they supply their oil and gas, then they can't export it. So they want their economies to be efficient. And they're looking at all the options. They themselves are. We encourage the OPEC producers not to restrain production when the market is calling for more oil. We think that a price signal of something like $60 a barrel is ample signal that the market wants more oil and gas, and so we take exception to production restraint, especially going into the winter just now, when the weather can change quickly as it has done in Europe and even in the U.S. and create a requirement that can't be met because the oil hasn't been produced some months before, especially in heating oil.
As in natural gas?
As in natural gas. Natural gas is a little less tense this year.
But we still don't want to use it for fueling our cars when we need so much of it to heat our homes, do we?
Those are decisions we make. Some years ago we had an Industrial Fuel Use Act which forbid putting gas into power generation or into industrial boilers. We decided that wasn't a good idea. Now we have it into power generation, and we have had a large amount of gas going into generating electricity. Is that the best use for it? I don't know. Right now the price of gas has moved around in such a way that the incremental capacity coming on is coal-based, because the United States has a huge coal resource base. And so we're behaving on the electricity front just the same as China, just the same as India. It's a domestic fuel, it's cheaper, it's here.
And yet at night we keep our coal burners on because they're the ones that take the longest to come back, so we keep them on, take off the natural gas. That's more emissions that we're actually...
It's more emissions. It's more emissions. Natural gas is an easier one to turn on, shut off. It is used for peak, that's right. Nuclear stays at base, coal stays at base. These are the realities. And so you say to yourself, we've got to find a better way to burn coal, and we've got to find out whether we can get the carbon out of these fossil fuels either before or after combustion.
How important is for the budget that we have in the United States? Our federal tax dollars go to this budget. How important is the money in the Department of Energy budget for research and development for all of these alternative fuels?
Well, I think the Department of Energy is pretty good value for money. They get a lot of leverage. They use the money around the world. They use their money in the national laboratories, which are renowned around the world for the quality of their work. any large enterprise probably has places that could do things better, but on the whole, I think the U.S. is getting pretty good value for the tax dollars into the Department of Energy.
Since tomorrow, we are still in London, tomorrow is the congressional election in the United States. Part of what Congress is allowed to do is earmark part of our budget. And 17% of the DOE budget was earmarked, which means that Congress was able to take that money out of the DOE budget with no open solicitation of bid and no responsibility for accounting. Do you think that we ought to make an amendment to that where Congress can no longer earmark the federal budget for their own use?
Well, I think the United States of America has predicated its governance on a fair degree of transparency, as much transparency as possible, and doing business in the sunshine. And as a former federal employee, it isn't always easy to do business and work in the sunshine with full transparency, but it's the right way to do it.
Mr. Ramsay, thank you for your time today.
It's been my pleasure.